All right, and we are on with Matt Kamp from Influence and Co. Do you say Influence and Co. or Influence and Company?
You can do either. Influence and Co is probably most common, but yeah, we'll take either.
And you're senior vice president there. So tell us a little bit about what you do. What's your role there?
Yeah, so I really focus on anything around company growth. It's a pretty entrepreneurial role. Been with the company since about 6 months in or so, and have kind of carved out my my little niche in terms of my best strengths. It's a kind of a combination, I would say, of marketing and sales. On the marketing side, I get anything from like webinars and co-branded partnership type work and referral partners and things like that, all the way through to sales and business development, speaking, things like that. So really broadly company growth, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that you were there 6 months into the existence of the company, right? Is that what you just said? And that was around 2012?
Yeah, we came on, I'd say late 2011 is when we were kind of officially founded. And then actually myself and a couple other guys had a app development company at the time. We were doing some mobile and web work for local businesses in Columbia, Missouri. Had a couple of different side projects going on that were really great learning experiences, in the entrepreneurship world. And then ended up getting to know the two co-founders, Kelsey Raymond now, was Kelsey Meyer, and John Hall, very, very well. We started Influence & Co. late 2011, and then we were actually in a co-working space next to them, and got to love their team and their vision and where they were headed, and fit our background and skill sets really well. And myself and two other guys who started the other company with me came on board with Influence & Co. from there, and have just been running with it since then. So that was about, I came on sometime 2012.
Mm-hmm. And that was not long after you graduated from Mizzou, right? You were in the journalism program there?
Yeah, I was J School. Yep, J School and business school. So kind of did a combination of strategic communications as well as marketing. So came out of that, was doing a lot of the entrepreneurial stuff on the side while a student, and then came on to Influence Co. after.
Mm-hmm. And so you're walking into an office with basically 2 or 3 other people to get this business going, right?
Yeah, there was just a handful of us. I definitely, it's been a pretty surreal experience to be a couple people around a table, and moved back out to St. Louis to start our office there with a coworker of mine. Was actually getting married and wanted to end up and start a family there down the road. So just worked out well, where they were extremely flexible in terms of location and where we could expand to, and that's how I got back to St. Louis. And I'm from St. Louis originally, so had always wanted to end up back here, and have kind of done the co-working hop here the last couple of years. I've been in Lab 1500 and T-Rex and Cortex. We're currently in Cortex still, and have loved many of the things about each community, and have just kind of outgrown each office. So it's been a good reason that we've continued to move around, and just been running with it the last 5+ years now.
Yeah. So I want to come back to a couple of things that you talked about, but I think probably the next thing we should talk about is just to give us sort of the overview of what Influence & Co. is. What do you do? Sure. So you're talking to some journalism, some students, or you will be when they watch this video,
right,
who have been studying journalism, studying the business of journalism. What is it that Influence & Co. does, and how does it fit into that ecosystem?
Yeah, and we're kind of we're somewhere in the meld of, there's journalism elements to what we do, and that skill set directly applies to what we do. There's content marketing, thought leadership, PR, somewhere in that realm. So we essentially work with companies who have a ton of knowledge in a particular area. A lot of subject matter experts on their team. They can be small teams, even individuals sometimes. If they're maybe like an author or a speaker, someone like that. All the way up to Fortune 500s, like we work with Microsoft, and have done work with Dell and big brands like that too. So it can be very, very wide ranging in terms of companies that we work with, but the goal is to help these companies who have all this knowledge and this subject matter expertise turn that knowledge into educational thought leadership content. So we really define that as content that's really giving as much value as possible to the reader, and really educating the particular reader about something within that industry, whether it be a trend or actionable things to do, or whatever the piece might be, lessons learned, personal stories, things like that. And we really help companies think about the strategy behind that, so to understand what can they speak on that no one else can in their industry. Who are they speaking to? What is their target audience looking for? What kind of content can we really create with that company that's going to really appeal both to that reader and then also to the publications we work with. So really our main differentiator, besides the actual process of creating that content and the technology we've developed to help make that process really efficient and effective, is our publication relationships. So at this point, we're the largest provider of expert content to media. We work with about 1,500 or so publications that are all over the board, from the household name publication like the Forbes and Inks of the world, to more niche industry trade publications. And the goal is to really help supply those publication staffs with really high quality expert content from the people that are living it day to day and are in the trenches and are at these companies and know what they're talking about within their space. And then on the flip side, help that company consistently get out there and build their influence as this trusted resource in what they do, by educating people at scale, using publications.
So are you in a position to give us a concrete example, a specific example of how this works? Yeah. Okay.
Sure. I mean, so one example that comes to mind right away, I mean, like I mentioned, we have plenty of different types of industries we work in. I know last year was about 30 plus industries that we worked in specifically. One example would be there's a tech development company out in San Francisco called Yeti. They help enterprise companies think about everything from how VR applies to their business, virtual reality, all the way through to AI to just general web and tech, specialized freelance projects, things like that. So for them, they want to be seen as this go-to, trusted expert within the tech space, and somebody to go to for help to solve their problem using technology, whatever that, whatever the means might be. So they create a lot of content where we work with their CEO, we work with, I believe, their COO, to consistently get content out there about how to develop an app or how to use technology to solve a business problem, or how things like new trends, like it could be virtual reality, it could be cryptocurrency, like whatever the trending pieces that business owners are thinking about, they'll weigh in and say, here's how this applies to your business. Because they're in the field, knowing that with what they do. So we're helping them think about strategy of how can they stand out as this trusted expert. We're helping them create content, and that's really that journalistic approach I mentioned is we want to be able to ask the right questions, tell a great story, really understand how that company works, and really dig into that company's unique expertise and turn that into great content. And then we'll do that in a way where we're coming in focused on doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but still authentically telling their story. So it's not ghostwriting; it's all interviewing. And then turn around and look at publications where we'll get them published in, like for example, Tony, their CEO, Tony Sherba is his name. We have a column at Entrepreneur now, entrepreneur.com, that he's consistently publishing content there to build up his brand, to build up the company's brand. And they've seen things like speaking opportunities come from what they do. They've seen organizations like the BBC share their white paper on virtual reality. They've had companies like even the California DMV approach them after reading an article on why the DMV should be using chatbots. So things like that have come up where it's a variety of business drivers, but then also them be approached by other opportunities to be seen as this trusted leader in what they do, and great for their company. And we're also really supplying content to publications on the other end too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me see if I can kind of break it down here and say it back to you a little bit. So
don't throw it a lot.
On one hand, you've got Yeti. This is a company that's interested in making people know more about who they are and what they do. and
Yep.
what their expertise is.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll contract you. They'll contract
Yep.
with you, and you will come in, and they're paying you to come in
Mm-hmm.
and help them refine, think about, and then produce content that
Yep.
then you'll take on the other side and use your relationships with publishers in order to get that content placed in their publications. And in the case of the CEO, one of those publications is entrepreneur.com. And so entrepreneur.com has found it valuable enough that they regularly run a column by this guy, as I understand it. Entrepreneur.com is not paying you. Yeti is paying, right?
Yep. And that's, so for us, that's a big thing to emphasize there is on the publication side, there's no financial transaction. It's these, they're publications that for us, we're able to really build a relationship with them and prove to them, hey, here's a valuable piece of content that is from an industry leader. It's truly a great piece to, to publish on your site and to educate your audience. And it's something that, there's no paid placement or anything like that. It's pitching them and showing them, hey, this is a exclusive free piece of content for your audience, and we've built up a rapport with them. We've built up a relationship with them based on our quality of work to continuously approach them and say, here are articles from people that are living it day to day, and we're able to really supplement everything else that they're doing. And that's one thing that we actually recently launched one white paper we did called The State of Digital Media. We do it every year. It's a firsthand research piece by our staff that our publications team will reach out to the managing editors of these publications that we work with. Typically 1 to 200 or so typically answer the survey. And that survey is about, why, one, what do you look for in content? Like, what do you look for in guest contributed content? What do you look for when someone is approaching you and saying, hey, here's a great article that I think your audience is going to love. You should publish this. Like, what can you do to really stand out and understand how can you, really appeal to that audience? And I know this past year, 94% of our respondents said that they're looking for more content from experts living it day to day. So looking for more content from people like Tony that are outside perspectives, that are ones that are in the trenches and can provide their expertise and personal lessons learned and unique stories for their audience like this. So we're paying, we're able to bring that value to the publication.
And there's something happening in the relationship between you and the publication, so that they understand that what you're going to be bringing to them is not garbage, that it's not advertising content. It's not Tony talking about how great Tony is, or Tony talking about how great Yeti is. I mean, how do you make that happen, and how do you make Tony know that? How do you make Tony understand that it can't be all about Tony, right? Yeah,
that is a very, very good question. It's probably, well, one, just statistically within that survey we did, the #1 reason why publications would reject something is if it's too promotional. So that right there is one of the biggest keys we have to immediately think about. Is this is all about education. For the client, they want to get their brand out there, but you do that through educating, and you're naturally building this real authentic trust because you're showing someone, you're teaching someone through content rather than a press release or an ad. It's something that is focused on actually giving value to the reader and focused on the reader first, and really helping, which goes hand in hand with what journalists want to do in terms of being able to educate people and being able to, they're taking a more investigative, approach to it, but being able to deliver value through stories and through content. So the publication itself has that very much in mind, and if you're at all promotional like that, they're not going to take it. It definitely takes, client education there. Like, we have to, when we're bringing on a company, we have to show them, here's why, here's why you can publish something on your own site, like a case study or things like that on your own site that shows your great work. But when you're talking about getting into a publication, like, it's all about giving value and about giving away your secrets and about educating people and be able to go to a publication and give them an exclusive piece of content that, is truly something unique.
So when you talk to Tony and just for example, maybe you say,
Yeah.
maybe there's an opportunity for you to talk about blockchain technology and how that can improve the supply chain for your company.
Yep.
You need to make Tony understand that it can't be about, here's how Yeti used blockchain to improve Acme Corporation's supply chain. It has to be more advice oriented, or 5 things you need to know about getting your supply chain linked in with the blockchain, or something like that. Is that
right? And you can, I mean, I would say like actionable advice like that, trends within the industry, insights that you have that the outside perspective might not have. Even a journalist that isn't in the industry every single day, may not have. That's the ideal type of content we're approaching a publication with. But yeah, we're really focused on showing them, hey, you can potentially, if it's an educational topic and it's something where you giving an example, it's going to build credibility with the audience and show them, here's why I should listen to Tony. Then you can include an example like that. But if it's saying, hey, we did this for this company, we should do this for you too, come get in contact with us, like that's not gonna work. So you definitely have to take a very very audience first approach to creating articles.
And so on this side of the equation, when we're talking about entrepreneur.com, they have developed a relationship with you and come to the understanding that the content that you're going to deliver from your clients is going to serve the audience that entrepreneur.com is trying to serve. And ultimately, they have the final word anyway. I mean, if they get something that they just think works, they'll just spike it. And
yeah, exactly. And we approach them with articles, whoever it is, we approach any publication with an article and say, here's a piece that, here are the reasons why we think it will, really engage your audience, why we think it's a good fit for your audience in particular. But we can't, it's up to them. It's up to that editorial team to determine, is this truly a great piece? Is it something that's not going to, you obviously don't want to alienate your audience with anything promotional. Like we work very hand in hand with the publication team there, or with the editorial staff there, to tailor each piece of content to fit their guidelines and to make sure it's going to best serve their audience.
Okay, so that's this side of the equation. The other side of the equation is Tony is hiring you to do something for him, and he wants something out of it. And so what Tony is expecting to get out of this, ultimately, I mean, Tony's playing the long game, basically, right? He's not putting out a press release and saying, call me, act on my information, write about me. He's sprinkling little nuggets of information out there over time that run in entrepreneur.com or maybe other publications, so that when I one day say, gosh, I wonder if I ought to look at using chatbots for my company, I'm going to Google that, and maybe his name is going to come up, and that's going to give me a reason to call him.
Yeah. I mean, for them, like it's a long-term branding game there, where it's not very transactional at all. It's not focused on, if they're looking at, we want leads from this or something like that. I mean, while yes, as long-term strategy, if you're seen as that resource, then people are going to come inbound and find your content and approach you. But it's about consistently getting out there. So rather than like a pay-per-click ad or a social media, whatever that transactional route might be, versus that, this is a much more educational route of focused on, hey, consistently get out there. And as you do this, and as you position yourself as a thought leader, you'll build influence with your target audience. And if you're doing this in many different publications that your target audience is already reading and consuming every day, you will build a brand and stay top of mind with them and continue to educate them and truly build trust with them if you're giving them value through this content. So when a company approaches us, typically their goals long term, it might be, hey, we want businesses approaching us to do business with us. Well, how you get there is by building your thought leadership and putting content out there that's going to show up high within a search result, is because it is that good content. And really, in the end, I mean, even from an SEO standpoint, like any search engine was built to show you the best content as quickly as possible. So our philosophy is, let's help you be the one that's giving out that good of content, that it's that highly engaging and that that specific to your target audience, that when they're searching for something, that you're the one that shows up.
All right, so that leads me to a question that Liz, one of our students, asked. How do you measure your client's success in impacting their audience? And I think we can interpret that from both sides of the equation, right? How do you interpret? How do we know entrepreneur's happy? How do we know Tony's happy?
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, from the publication side, for them, I mean, I would say, they are looking for views, engagement, like they're looking to build a, sustainable model for themselves too. I mean, it's no secret that, publications are having to figure out how to monetize, and having to, journalism's having to, evolve from that standpoint. So for them, I mean, they definitely, want content that can power their viewership. So anytime we pitch an article, like being able to show them, hey, here's what you're getting out of it in terms of engagement, in terms of we even track like social metrics and how an article is performing versus the average article on that site, things like that, to really show them like, hey, this is truly a great piece of content that your audience loves. And it's it's a free piece for them too, so they're able to see, okay, this is valuable. On the flip side with the client, I mean, we really try to kind of reverse engineer what is your end goal and what are all of those elements that you need to get there, that you need in place to really achieve that success. So from if it's traffic and SEO and that kind of thing, then publishing to authoritative sites, that's going to be important. Getting into publications that can help you out in terms of linking back and things like that, that's important as well. So success metrics there can be your overall search visibility and how keywords are performing and all that kind of stuff. We would definitely not call ourselves an SEO shop, but clients do approach us with that being an end goal. I would say, from a thought leadership standpoint, it can be a little more qualitative, a little more nebulous there of, even things like social metrics, engagement scores, like, are people finishing the article on your site? How is your content being syndicated to other publications? Are you seeing things come through like, speaking engagements, awards, podcasts, opportunities, like things like that aren't always as easy to measure, but are something that are a very real goal. And really, a lot of times our clients are going to be leveraging this content to build credibility within any kind of sales conversation. So they want to come to the table and say, okay, if somebody's going to potentially do business with us, when they look up our name, what are they seeing out there? Are they seeing content from us in all these publications, and are we able to build trust quickly because they see that what we have to say is worth getting out there. So that that's a little more qualitative, all the way through to, we talked about like lead generation, like inbound leads. That's a long-term goal that is also measurable. We talk about this inbound funnel where you are getting out in front of.
When you say inbound leads, you're talking about people picking up the phone and calling or emailing and saying, I might be interested in doing business with you.
Exactly. Yeah. So somebody the philosophy of inbound is putting out something valuable and then doing that at scale, and people seeing that and coming back to you and coming inbound to you rather than you picking up the phone and calling them, or you sending them an email saying, hey, do business with us. Like it's focused on pull rather than push. So from an inbound standpoint, if you are thinking about, okay, you want business opportunities to come from this, you want people to approach me, I need to think about a couple different things. That the top of that funnel, we really talk about this 3-stage funnel, where the top of that might be publications. It's how do you get out there, how do you get in front of new audiences, speaking, other things like that fall under that top of the funnel. We would say the middle of the funnel would be your own media piece. So that community you're building on your own blog, and are you publishing case studies, white papers, things that are downloadable on your site. So that way, when people come back to your own site, you have a resource there for them to continue learning and to give you their email address because they want this guide to the trends that you see in your industry or whatever that might be. So that would be kind of be that middle layer, and then bottom of the layer would be, okay, now that you have this email address, what do you do with that, and how do you continue to nurture them and give them great content that's going to educate them, and then get to them to a point where you have calls to action and saying, you've been learning about how to apply VR to your business throughout all of our content. Would you like to chat with us about how to do that? So it progressively gets more calls to action from that standpoint. But if you have that kind of inbound funnel in place, that's how you can potentially see success from a more quantitative standpoint in terms of generating leads.
Got it. And so, as you say, it depends on the goals of the client, and some of the goals may be some of those goals may be more measurable, tangible, quantifiable. Some of them may be more qualitative and perhaps not as quantifiable, but there is a way in both cases to sort of, and then ultimately, as Liz says, if they keep coming back as clients, that's a good measure of whether or not they feel like they're getting what.
Right.
And the fact is, if I get one, depending on my business, if I can trace one piece of business back to you, that might cover the cost of my of my contract with you for a year.
And that's why I would say, typically we're working with companies that may or may not have higher client lifetime values because, like you said, if you have, if you're doing this the right way and you have, one company come through that could cover everything that we're doing for you within that agreement. I'd say the majority of the time we're B2B, just because of the nature of this strategy. Like, I'd say more consumer products are more focused on things that are more transactional, like social and pay-per-click and that kind of stuff. So we're more traditionally B2B, and then in the end, on the qualitative side, like it could take a variety of different things. Like, companies use content to achieve a variety of different business goals. That could be, hiring talent. That could be raising funding, and they want to build credibility for that. It could be to open doors for partnership conversations with, maybe they want to talk to, maybe they are a product and they want to talk to, Target and Walmart and these other companies that they need to be, seen as credible to do. So it can be building your credibility, which again is also a qualitative thing. But we really try to think about what are those end business goals, what are those end situations where the company is saying, hey, we're so glad we brought an influence and go to help us, and then kind of think about what are the elements in place that we can do to get to that point.
Okay. So this line of questioning is going to get to some stuff that another student is asking about, Jessica. We talked about Tony. We talked about entrepreneur.com. What's happening in here?
Yeah, within the company?
Yeah.
Specifically like process and things like that? Or?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there's kind of, we take a very, we're, in the end an agency, so high service approach. We're very, I guess you could say tech enabled. We have that workflow platform I mentioned that makes what we do much more efficient and effective. I would say even from, all the way down to how we create content, we take a very data-driven approach to that and say, okay, here's the trending content out there within each publication. Here's what kind of topics do very well there. And that's why our content performs so well at particular publications, is because we can take a data-driven approach to creating content that's going to really cut through the clutter and stand out. So there's that side of what we do. In terms of the actual process itself, and how we're structured, There's me, I'm on the growth side of it. There's marketing and sales, all focused on growth of the company, general operations, and then the majority of our team is the production team, and it's the people that are in it day to day that are creating this content. That's why I think this class is so applicable to what we do. I mean, my background, like I mentioned, is business and journalism. Probably over half our staff has a journalist background, and we really apply that skill set of telling a great story and asking the right questions and being able to really communicate effectively to how we create content, how we work. We structure internally with each client, and we call them pods, but you're essentially an account strategist who's the main kind of point person for the client, the main person that's owning that client relationship, and really understanding how our content is going to achieve their business goals and how to get there. Outside of that, a content strategist is really focused on understanding, what can that client speak on that no one else can in their industry, and who is their target audience, what are they reading online, what from a topic standpoint, from a publication standpoint, like really trying to bring all these elements together and brainstorm topics focused on combining all these things. Finding that sweet spot. And then on our team, we have editors and writers that the writers are all over the world, actually, all kinds of different expertise. The editors are the ones that are making sure each article is really fit for that client, for that publication. And this full team is walking through and, kind of doing an initial strategy, initial strategy work with that client to understand how can we create great content that's going to solve their needs, and then after that, actually working with them actively to do that interviewing and to leverage the knowledge across the team from a particular client to turn that into the articles that can publications are looking for. So we're very active with that entire process and do a lot of the heavy lifting there. And then on the flip side, have a publications team that those are the ones that are dealing directly with the editors at the publications to really make sure that whenever we talk to them, where we understand what they're looking for, we understand topics they're looking for, and we can best appeal to them and best show them our value. So we're structured from an agency, really pretty horizontal from that standpoint, and really focused on that pod-based approach.
So on the front end, when you're bringing Tony in as a client, your content strategists and your account reps are having a fairly deep dive conversation with him so that you can walk away understanding exactly what it is Tony is an expert on and what it is that Tony is equipped to talk about. And then you might go back to the office and say, now let's take a look at what's sort of in the news right now, or what's trending right now that we might be able to hang our hat on at the moment, and see how that aligns with the things that Tony can speak about. Is that a pretty fair summary?
Yeah, I think we're not as focused on the newsy side. It won't be our stories that are like breaking news stories for that day. It's a little bit longer term in terms of like, okay, this general trend within an industry is people are very interested in this and looking to be educated about this. Content like that is usually a really good fit to say, what does this mean, and helping people interpret that through the knowledge of the expert. We typically are working with both the marketing team and the experts at that particular client, where the marketing team is really focused on the workflow of the content and making sure that we're getting things done, and making sure that once that article is created, they're using that through everything that they're doing, whether it be a newsletter or their blog or everything else they're doing in marketing. So typically the marketing team is the point person that we're working with, but then we're tapping into experts across their team, whether it be the CEO all the way through to it might be like the head of partnerships at a company, or head of innovation, or whoever it might be, working with those experts throughout the brand and throughout the company to help understand what can they specifically speak on that is very unique, their personal expertise, and then how does that apply to the company's strategy and business goals overall.
So one of Jessica's questions was, is there any kind of model that you follow with each client, or is it different each time? And what I think I hear you saying is you have a pretty a pretty standard format for how you approach this sort of thing. Otherwise, you couldn't scale it.
Right. Yep.
With enough flexibility in the process to
Mm-hmm.
tailor something more individually to my needs versus Acme Company's needs.
Exactly. Yeah, the general process is pretty set. I mean, we have some flexibility. Like some clients, we can pull their thoughts better via a Hangout interview, Skype interview like this, versus them typing something out. But we can be flexible in terms of how we extract that knowledge from them. But I would say the overall process of strategy work first month, then get on the same page there, approve that, and then us sending over topics that we know they can speak on individually. The topics are tailored, the topics are customized, but that process of sending over a topic with a question set to go through, and then really dive into that with our journalistic hat on, and that skill set, and then turning that into the full article, which they approve, and then we turn around and work with the publication to tailor, to really make sure that we tailor that pitch and fit their needs and provide as much value as possible on the back end. That process overall, while it's very unique from client to client in terms of subject matter, process overall is pretty set, so it can be scalable.
So one of several of our students are interested in kind of understanding how you guys look at yourself
mm-hmm.
in the context of the spectrum of journalism, I guess, if you will.
Yep.
I mean, we
sure.
talk about brand journalism, we talk about native advertising and content marketing, and all of these terms get thrown around, and I'm not sure they're all necessarily very well defined.
Yeah.
What do you think about those concepts, and then where does Influence & Co. fit into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there definitely needs to be transparency around it in terms of differentiating like native versus or sponsored content versus thought leadership and editorial content. We very much fit into the op-ed side of not a paid placement and very non-promotional. I think in the journalism world, broadly, I think we really want to, we definitely are not trying to replace journalistic content by any means. Like there is definitely a place in democracy for the investigative work that they do and the reporting, and being able to us come in and really supplement that and give them great content from industry experts that for publications will help them stay afloat financially because they're consistently generating more views and engagement from content. We want to help journalism that way, but it's definitely not a replacer by any means. And I think for us it's exciting because I think the journalistic that journalism background and English background, writing background, and any of that type of stuff is what we look for. Like there's very much a place for that in what we do, and being able to communicate very well and especially written, but effectively that way is a big deal for people that we're looking to hire. And like I mentioned, I think probably over half our staff has that background, and we even have people like because we're like I mentioned, we're based out of Columbia, Missouri. The Columbia Tribune has had a rough past 2 years since selling, and we had some of the people that were laid off there we hired and are working with and are taking that that approach to how we work. So I think that skill set is extremely valuable. I think in the overall journalism spectrum, there's definitely room for disruption, with the overall publication model. You definitely see a lot of the smaller publications, even things like Matchable sell for not its true real value, and there's something to be said there. So people, we're trying to evolve and figure things out. I mean, there are some cases of publications like obviously the New York Times and Washington Post are doing pretty good right now, and that's the political world probably aided that a little bit. But overall, I think there's definitely room for disruption, and we really kind of see ourselves as an aid to that from being an additional source of great content for those publications, and are looking for that skill set to apply to what we do. So it's tough to categorize specifically what we do. I'd say it's somewhere in between, like I mentioned, content marketing, and then all kind of a thought leadership approach to PR, because it's very op-ed, but
I would not say that you're in that area of native advertisement or native advertising, which John Oliver has famously skewered on his show.
Yeah, all of that, and even thought leadership, like that's such a people. It's kind of like saying you're a guru or an expert in something. Like how do you can pass off as that, and it's not always the most credible term. We want to talk about it as a way to think about content. We thought, when we say thought leadership, we mean giving value to the reader by educating them from leading thoughts from people who are in the space and have the credibility to say something. So we try to take that approach, but there's definitely transparency within all of this is extremely important.
Yeah. You mentioned disruption. It's something that we've talked about in this class, particularly in the context of how the newspaper industry has been disrupted over the last 20 years. One of our students talked about, I think it's Liz here. How do you, we've seen the internet and its effect on traditional journalism, and we've seen how social media has had an impact on how we do journalism, both in terms of news gathering and distribution. What do you think about when you think about how your business could be disrupted? Is that something that you guys have given any thought to?
Yeah, I think publications are always they're trying to figure out how to monetize as well, because they're doing great work, but it definitely, it takes a lot of work to do that. Like they need to figure out ways to have their to have a business model like that too. So I think for us, we're in a fortunate position that we've built good relationships with these publications and are able to have those kind of conversations of understanding, what is, what are the most effective ways that you are monetizing, and what do you see happening in the industry, and what kind of, how can we be an aid there? Because in the end, our goal is to be able to deliver expertise from people who are, truly experts in the field and get it in front of the right people online. And publications have an audience, and the companies we're working with, while our current process and our current deliverable might not always be the same, because the publication could be looking for different things, and whether it be video or audio or whatever the final deliverable is, we want to help be that one that makes that happen. So we're positioning ourselves to be both a trusted resource for publications, and then also be very flexible in terms of pivoting what that specific deliverable looks like. And I think it's something that will evolve over time. We actually just had last fall a symposium at University of Missouri around that exact topic. Had all kinds of publications, different editors and things like that attend that and talk about monetization and the future of publications. So we're always wanting to be in the forefront of that conversation and be seen as a resource that no matter what can supply all these experts for the publication in whatever vehicle that might be. So in terms of disruption, we want to be on the front end of that and always be this trusted resource for the end, the publication.
All right, so I have a question, but before I get to that, is leading me to a question from Brooke, another student. And I don't remember what it was that you said that's making me think about this, but she's interested in knowing how, well, I'll just read it. How do you keep the information you develop proprietary when it is distributed to different companies you're working with? So I guess maybe you can tackle that and interpret it how you.
So not sharing like secrets between clients, is that what you mean?
I think that may be where she's going with that.
So there's a couple different ways. One way I could interpret that, I would say, is the content itself. we really do preach the message of give away your secrets, and being able to consistently get out there, and even if it's something that you're afraid the reader's going to take action on, they will not. It is an idea versus execution. The execution is everything, and especially if you can get out there and show them, wow, this is if you're able to give away trade secrets, then and a reader sees that, they'll say, wow, these guys know what they're talking about. And it'll, show them, hey, there's a lot of work behind this. Like there is a lot to be able to execute on something like that. So, we do deal with that fear sometimes from clients of, oh, I don't want to give away all my secrets, but having them do that is where they can truly build credibility and truly stand out. And that's where great content comes from. Another way I could interpret that question is if we're working with, say, for example, Tony, Yeti, like they do tech development, not the only company out there that does that. And we work with, multiple. So for each of them, they have a very unique approach. They have a very unique skill set of what they can talk about, of who they're trying to reach, of, all these different things that for us, we make sure that they work with different teams internally. So that way, you don't have any kind of conflict of interest there. But, that process of creating great content, they can't replicate that because each article, we're not writing it for them. We're leveraging their expertise. So they're not forging that. They're not taking that from a competitor. And then on the publication side, it's not like we're quoted by a we aren't given a quota from a publication to say, well, we'll only take 2 articles from you this time, and then you approach them with 3 clients and say, well, we have to pick one. Like we're never in that situation. So it's never a matter of having to choose which client's getting published where. It's all up to the publication of if it's a good piece of content and they are bought into the message there. So it's from a proprietary information and from a conflict of interest standpoint, we're never we aren't in that situation.
You said a second ago, pardon me?
I hope that answers your question, but
yeah. Well, you said a second ago, we don't write the content. I'm not sure I understand what you meant there because you do write content. So it's not you personally.
Yeah. We don't put words, we don't ghostwrite the content. So we're not, we're not in, there are agencies that you can say, okay, I want an article on tech development. I'll pay you $100 and then I get some generic article about tech development. We're very much a high touch approach where, we're not going to be able to create an article that this company, that isn't authentic to this company. Like we're focused on the interview and we're, you're the company we work with, they're the expert in the space. We might be experts in using their expertise, if that makes sense, but we're not the ones that are, manufacturing the article.
So just to make sure I'm clear, because as you probably know, I've done some freelancing for you guys. So, so when you talk about not ghostwriting it, you're getting the content, you're extracting the content from Tony, and your content strategists are putting together notes based on the topic that we're going to cover in this particular column. But then you're going to turn to a professional writer to say, notes and make them write them in a way that's cohesive, that is that makes sense, that is telling a story.
Yeah. So maybe ghostwriting isn't the best term to use because there's a couple different ways you can interpret that.
Okay.
But we differentiate from other content shops by really taking a journalistic approach to asking great questions, and then because there are definitely writer networks out there that you can just say, hey, here's the topic, give me an article. So I try to differentiate that way. That
does make a difference. But the bottom line is Tony's not an expert at writing.
Correct.
But Tony has knowledge, and you guys are the experts in extracting that knowledge and finding the resource that's going to present it in a cohesive storytelling way that's going to appeal to the readers of entrepreneur.com.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So quick question. We've been talking about writing, and I think you mentioned podcasts and video. Do you guys do that as well? Or are you focused specifically on narrative writing?
So I mean, we would be open to what the publication is looking for. I mean, we are traditionally that's been written, and we've even heard. I mean, even when we first started, we had heard I mean, obviously there's like YouTube and all these other different ways to deliver video content, and video is a very important piece of your marketing strategy. Like, I'm definitely not bashing video, but most publications we work with, their primary focus is the written piece. So it's something like we pulled in partners for, we're always thinking about is other formats to deliver it in. We have experimented with podcasts and things like that too, and are very intrigued by other forms of ways to be able to deliver the expertise, but our primary focus is on the written stuff. It's on the written word, and it's up to the publications to help dictate what's going to be most valuable for them. But that has always been the number one need, and it's something that I don't see completely turning on its head anytime soon. So.
Okay. So how does Influence & Co. practice what it preaches?
Yeah, so I mean, we are very heavily doing this ourselves, and that's how we're growing our company. If we have to be great at it ourselves, we're going to do it for other people. So we have case studies on this on our site. Actually, our site's a really big resource for anything around content marketing, thought leadership, SEO, all of that stuff. So if that's something that interests any of the students, feel free to look at our blog. It's definitely like Kurt mentioned, it's we practice what we preach, and create a ton of content from our own team. I write a little bit. Our marketing team writes a ton. Our CEO, our president, our other salespeople, a lot of people across our team are creating content actively, and we're doing things like running columns and doing other things externally to be able to consistently get out there. And I know this year inbound is projected to be our number one source of actual sales calls, and it's because we've gotten a lot of content out there over 4 or 5 years now that we're really actively able to have practice the science and art of inbound. And we personally use HubSpot. There's plenty of solutions out there. Hatchbuck's another great one that's local, that there's CRMs, there's marketing automation, there's these other tools to help enable that we really really show clients, hey, if inbound leads are your end goal, you need these technical things there too, in place to get to that success. But we very much subscribe to the notion that you have to be great at something if you're going to do it for other people. So
yeah, sure. And if just before we got onto this call, I Googled Influence & Co. and you guys were quoted in lots of places, not the least of which was well, I may still have it. I may still have that search up. But I found you on an article about content marketing on Huffington Post, Inc.com. I see you quoted in that, BBC News.
I have to look at the BBC one.
So yeah, and I assume that's because when some of these reporters or editors are looking for experts in the field to talk about content, will come up. So
yeah, that's the goal, is to truly continuously put out your knowledge like that, and you'll naturally build influence that way. And when like you mentioned, if you're on the other side, you're a journalist looking for somebody to bring in for their thoughts on a subject, then you're going to search for the top experts in the space. And if you're the one providing the content, then it all works together like that.
Yeah. So you, at the beginning of this conversation, you talked about how you were early on one of the early employees at Influence & Co. 4 or 5 other people around a table. And now I think before we started, you'd said there's 30 people in Columbia?
Yeah, so I'd have to look. I would guess we're probably maybe 80, 85 now full time, if you counted all of our locations. Yeah, when I came on, I think I was technically number 8 or something like that. I'd have to look, but yeah, so it's been exciting. It's been really fun to like learn that much and to kind of grow our office here. And it was me and then Melanie, one of my co-colleagues, at a coffee table at Lab 1500 for about a year, and have kind of like grown St. Louis and our own culture here, and really, from here originally. So it's really awesome to be able to hire here and build presence here. And yeah, we've got like about 30 out here, probably about 40 or 50 in Columbia, and then a handful in Kansas City, and then one in Denver as well. So all
you have a whole network of freelancers that you work with, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So the freelance, that would be full-time employees. That's what we're looking at. Freelance, or the writer piece of what we do. I mean, we have probably 100 different writers in the stable that are all super high quality. Have to vet their quality. Have to always consistently make sure that the work is top notch, and they're all over the world, and people like yourself that are fantastic to work with too. So yeah, I would say full time, that's what we're looking at, but all told, it's a little bit bigger that way.
So when you started, did Influence & Co. have a client?
Yes, I don't know how many. That's actually a really good question. Yeah, we definitely had clients. We actually we started off with doing just, again, practicing what we preach and doing a lot with John and Kelsey, because they had their own businesses. John's background was in real estate, Kelsey's was in marketing, and we helped them. And then also Brent Beshore out in Columbia with Adventures, worked with him quite a bit to get content out with other individual industries, and realized, hey, this is pretty valuable for business owners. Maybe we're onto something, or they continue to evolve and evolve and evolve. And yeah, it's I don't know how many. That's actually a good question, but definitely more than one. But
yeah. Well, we've got about 4 minutes left. I just thought maybe what we could do is leave some time for you to close it out. Is there anything that occurs to you in the course of this conversation that you think we can cover that might be useful information for the students in this class?
No, I mean, I think you guys did a great job asking questions. I see how it's a journalism focused class. good question askers. Yeah, I mean, I think in general, like I'm very excited about the future of journalism. It just might not look as traditional as it has for the last 100 plus years, and it can be an exciting place to be in that skill set of telling a great story and being able to really dig in, be curious and be able to communicate that. That's always going to be extremely valuable, no matter how things evolve, even with things like AI and technology evolving and augmenting what we do. I think that ability to connect with people and tell a story is never gonna go away.
All right. Well, I think we'll leave it at that then. It's a good place to close this out. And I appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure if the students were here, they'd tell you that consistently. Whenever we've had guest speakers in our class, the students have always been very appreciative. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right. Take care.
Sure.